Does anybody know who this is? I thought I'd start with, I was thinking about the subject matter for today, and the word. Actually, before I say the word, does anybody know who this is? Do you know? Do you know? No. Anybody know who this is? No? Okay. So this is my Wikipedia. This is Arthur Tansley, 1871 to 1955. Why would I be interested in Arthur Tansley? Why should we all be interested in Arthur Tansley? He was a botanist. But he was the guy that came up with the word ecosystem, which I thought was interesting, because obviously we're here to talk about ecosystems. And what is an ecosystem? We throw this word around quite a lot, but what is it? What do we mean by it? What do we mean in terms of a regional ecosystem? When we go over to Boston and Estonia, and what some of the things we're going to hear today, what do we mean by ecosystem? And I think particularly from an entrepreneurial point of view. So this is Arthur Tansley, who first coined the phrase ecosystem in 1935, and it was a geographic area where living organisms, both biotic and abiotic, form this functional unit, and these are these interactions. And that's what you kind of I get a sense of when I talk about ecosystem. It's about how all these different things interplay with one another to make and strengthen them in the region. And so, I think from an entrepreneurial point of view, that's about how do the universities, Aberdeen and RGU, how does the Opportunity North East, how do the investors, the students, the entrepreneurs in residence, how do they all connect in a way that is meaningful? And so it's interesting how we've kind of moved from a botanist's definition of ecosystem and that kind of environmental ecosystem supporting one another and creating something that's greater than the parts, to this kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I thought I just wanted to share that with you and play with that a little bit to bring to life what it is that we're talking about today. But I'm not going to talk about this today. And I remember when we started this journey of having this event, that what can we talk about? What's the subject matter, and what's going to resonate with the people here? And I wanted it to be about ecosystems, because I think certainly with the leadership of Opportunity Northeast and with the partners in the region, I think we've built a really strong ecosystem. We're beginning to build a really strong ecosystem in the Northeast. And so Jen Scott from Opportunity Northeast has been invited along to share with you some of the insights into what we've been doing there. And then I was aware that Ross had recently visited Estonia to do as a bit of a learning journey, to look at the Estonian ecosystem there. And again, asked Ross to come and talk to us about what he learned from there and what he can share with the regional ecosystem. And then, of course, there's some amazing things going on in Ireland that we've seen, both in Belfast and Dublin. And so I reached out to a few contacts there, and we're delighted to have Ian Brown. So Ian isn't with us today, but he is on Zoom, but he's going to be coming in and telling us a little bit about the Irish ecosystem, because I think there's a lot of learnings that we can take from there. So we've got some really nice, quite different flavors of ecosystems that we're going to be presenting today. And then we'll all come together at the end, do a bit of a panel session, ask some questions. And we had a little meeting yesterday, didn't we? We said, let's debate as well, everything, because there's no right answers. But if there's an opportunity, something you don't agree with, this is a great safe space to not agree with something, or, share your views on how we can build and develop ecosystems and what we can learn from other ecosystems. So let me start with a question that we spoke about when we met yesterday. What are the most valuable lessons that emerging entrepreneurial ecosystems can learn from those more mature ones? And how can we, something that Ian spoke about there, how can we adapt those insights without simply copying and pasting models? Because they need to be fit for purpose for the region, and all the regions are so different. So what are the valuable lessons that we can learn, but then how do we adapt those insights so that they fit our context? Who wants to kick off that? Go for it, Jen.
Okay, so it is really interesting, because we've been out to Boston now a few times to learn from their ecosystem, and it's kind of intimidating, right? Because the northeast of Scotland is, in a much earlier stage in our entrepreneurial work. And Boston is just incredible. I mean, the buzz around there, the number of investors, the number of businesses, just phenomenal. But actually, MIT have been so supportive, because Chris and I sat around a table with some of their incredible alumni, these tech billionaires who now feed back into their mentoring program. And they were so encouraging. And they said, 50 years ago, Boston was, this was all empty space. We didn't have the companies. We built it. And actually, we're just, our founders are the same as your founders, and now they've met some of our founders, and they say your founders are as good, as strong as the founders that we've got here. So I think part of what we need to learn is that there's a kind of a Scottish maybe shyness or sense of we're not quite what they are over in the US. But actually, I think we've really learned a lot that our founders, they go out to EDP, they stand on their feet. The Scots are leading the teams that are winning the competition at the end of the week. And I think it's a kind of a confidence boost. So we've learned a lot from that.
Yeah. And do you think there's something about the alumni? Because it is interesting, because MIT have a really strong alumni and they do continuously give back. And, a little bit about what Ian was saying, if they then reinvest in the fabric of that ecosystem. Do you think in Aberdeen, particularly, a lot of people have made a lot of money from oil and gas, and Ian does reinvest that into the Wood Foundation, but should there be more of that happening through the alumni that are making some money, or through those individuals who have made a lot of money from oil and gas and need to start reinvesting it into those emerging companies that are coming through?
I think there's an interesting, just on the alumni piece, in a university, we tend to have alumni managed here and entrepreneurship and research over here. And actually, we need to bring them together. There was a really interesting, I'm an alumnus of Durham University. And 3 years ago, I got an email that said, we're delighted to announce the launch of the Durham University Alumni Entrepreneurial Network. And I was like, as an entrepreneur, somebody had found I was like, wow, this is really interesting. Not just because it's interesting in its own right, but because I can help. I can offer some time, some knowledge, some expertise. They weren't asking for money. They were asking for people just to engage. And then those people engaged, and then they formed an advisory board for their student enterprise kind of main program, flagship program of 10 people, 10 alumni. And then the year or so later, so about 2 years in, an angel group sprung up that started to invest in this. So over a period of 2.5 years, the thing has evolved into a fairly vibrant network. And I think there's something really, really powerful in that. It's not, entrepreneurial alumni are different than standard alumni. They think differently and they will engage differently. And we absolutely back you differently on that.
Ian?
I think one thing that is really underappreciated in any startup ecosystem is the connectivity. It is the network between like all of the parties involved, but also very much internationally. And I think that we all should be building international first at the moment. One thing that I do and take advantage of, and which Ireland probably has a competitive advantage internationally, is like its diaspora. Right, they're incredibly well connected. They're incredibly willing to give back and help. And there's a volunteer group globally called Digital Irish, who are like different cities around the world. So if you're landing somewhere, we'll connect you in with people. And I actually took advantage of that recently, as I organized a trip to the US for Irish founders, and I took 50 out. I took 25 from Northern Ireland, 25 from the south of Ireland, and we went to New York for a week around St. Patrick's Day. And St. Patrick's Day is one of those days where we get to cheat, right? Like everyone in the world knows it, so it opens any door you want at any time. But actually, that diaspora network it's something like I went to university in Glasgow, by the way, so I have a strong affinity for Scotland and like everything Scottish. But I've often wondered why this is not something that's well coordinated at a Scottish national level as well, because you have the same type of diaspora, but it's not actually doing you a lot of good at the moment, and I don't know why that is. And it's something that we should probably think about how we can do more of, because that international network piece is so powerful. Like we're able to open up doors, we're able to get founders to talk to the right people. Like we talk about Boston, MIT, but you can do it globally with this sort of diaspora network. And I think it's something that we don't invest anywhere near enough time and money in to like strengthen, because if you can build that international network, it really strengthens the local one as well.
Yeah, I agree. There's a global Scots network that Scottish Enterprise, or SDI, run, isn't there? That we occasionally tap into. I think there's a huge role for alumni. Certainly when I was at Strathclyde, my first role at Strathclyde was running the Strathclyde Entrepreneurial Network, which is connecting with alumni. And that was sort of being led by Jim McDonald at the time. We did this Strathclyde 100 where we brought alumni in to hear pictures and things like that. So that was a big part of that.
Estonia evolved from the former Soviet states, and actually as part of its function within that, it had a very high technology and cyber kind of capability set within Estonia, which obviously is the states broke up, that was left behind. So they had kind of a bit of a start at as the Berlin Wall came down. But they decided that what they were going to do as a government was invest heavily in digital and technology, not just because it's, they had foresight or whatever. Arguably, they may not have had foresight. They just thought they'd do it, but they wanted to build trust. There's a huge element of building trust with their population. So they effectively said, okay, if we can connect closely and support our population with providing easy access to all the services in a robust, trustworthy way, then effectively our population of, so they don't know the population of Estonia, 1.3 million people. Population of Scotland, 5.5, so about a quarter the size of Scotland, basin big comparative. So they want to be customer focused and build that trust.
So another question, just leading on from what you were saying there about networks. The second question was around what role do the networks play, particularly fostering, the Entrepreneurs in Residence program that we have. We have a number of Entrepreneurs in Residence here today in the universities. And how can universities and institutions ensure that those networks are accessible and impactful? And not just in campus, but beyond the campus as well.
But I think beyond the campus is probably more important almost than within the campus there. I would say, I think how is the network useful and valuable is it's just opening doors, really. When you're building something, particularly, I spend my time working with all the founders who are all pre-Series A, right? So it's all early stage companies. And one of the biggest things they have is getting connections, right? They can't get through to the customers or the investors or whoever it might be. And so the network just unlocks that stuff for you really, really well, particularly the US network, where they actually are much, much better at doing introductions than we are in Europe, because they don't attach necessarily the social credibility to the introduction that we do. So they're much more open to doing it, and both parties know this, and they don't burn their social credibility from doing an introduction. So they're very much more open to doing it. But that's what it does. Is by doing this, by allowing a founder to then be always 1 or 2 steps removed from somewhere they need to get to, is an amazing unlock. I think as well, the biggest thing for me about the networks as well is it's raising the ambition, because most people who build, I'm going to use Northern Ireland as the context here, people who build in Northern Ireland tend to think about, oh, right, I need to sell to, the customer down the road, and that's who I'm competing with, this other company over here. And it's not until you've actually lifted your eyes above the horizon that you realize, your competition is not here. Your competition is in Shenzhen, or it's in, Australia, or it's in America. And it's and they're running faster and harder than you. So as soon as you can kind of get that realization through the network, it's a big, big help, right? Because you actually, so even just with that group that I just took out to the US, when I get back, they're telling their friends about it, and they're all more ambitious than they were before they went out there. And it's great. So I think that network brings, it brings the connectivity, but it brings a level of ambition that really is not part of the local BME.
No, that's a really good point, I think. And Ross, so the Entrepreneur in Residence, so a number of them are here, and you're kind of leading on some of that work. What role can they play in strengthening regional entrepreneurial ecosystems?
I think there's so their lived experience of actually building and scaling and creating companies. But I think as an individual, you will have areas of knowledge and expertise. So I'll give an example. I founded a software company in 2009, building mobile software. So the iPhone was a year old when I first started. So 10% of people had them. I now get contacted 16 years later. People say, "Oh, you're a tech entrepreneur. Can you help me found my AI company?" And I say no, because I don't know how to found an AI company. I know how to found a company. I can talk about that, but I know people who are actually in the AI situation, currently founding AI companies, because they're the ones that know how to found and work with AI. And actually, those timescales are really, kind of shrinking. So if you're more than 2 years outside of AI, then you're well behind the curve, if you like. So I can connect them with people who are relevant. So as individuals, we only have a certain amount of knowledge. I'm not an IP expert, but I know people who are, and I can connect somebody who needs IT advice with that. So we're trying to do this horizontal connection through the network, in and out of university. So it might be to other people that are entrepreneurs, or it might be to IP experts in the university, but that the students don't know about, or the staff don't know about. So,
Jen, have you got anything to?
Yeah, I think we do. The networking that we see from our mentor program is incredible. So, each founder has a team of 3 or 4 mentors their networks are enormous. So, but in that, the founders then develop a much bigger network. But we actually see it through the mentor community as well, because they are people who didn't know each other, and we bring them together every 2 months for a community session. Actually, they introduce each other and the network expands. But just touching on the reaching outwards, and I think it is really important. We've recently had a few founders who have left our region and have grown businesses, sold businesses, and come back. And their viewpoints, they've got, completely different viewpoints of what's happening in Scotland compared to what the people who have grown here have got. And I think that gives us a really, really interesting discussion. I think sometimes it's really critical of our funding environment, of the support that's available for businesses. And I think that brings a really important discussion to the table that benefits all of our founders. So I think when people, and lots of people come back to the Northeast, right? So we see that, they grow up here, they go and they come back. And I mean, I did that myself, and we see lots of founders doing that as well. And I think the lessons, their global lessons are really important for us. But at the centre of the T, you have the founder or co-founding team. If there's more than one founder, they should both be involved. And then surrounding that, you have a team of 3 or 4 mentors, all from different backgrounds and experiences. So they meet together in person every 6 to 8 weeks. And have a real discussion. It's an exchange of views. So I think sometimes one-to-one mentoring can be more intimidating, especially if it's with a really experienced leader. But in this scenario, you get to see that they've all done things different ways. You get to hear their views and experiences, and you get to understand what might be best for your company. The focus is on the founder and not the business. So sometimes people think, is it a little bit like a board if I'm not ready for a board yet? It's, a board is interested, they might be investing in it. They've got different motivations for your business being successful. This is about you as a founder and the difficult decisions that you have to make. So it's a really, really interesting framework. We've been in, we did phase 1 in the pilot. We're now in phase 2, been in for 18 months, and it's working very well.
Any questions in the room or any online, Maria?
So before I buy my plane ticket to go to Estonia, can we talk about how we can establish that culture here?
We can all control our own actions and behaviours. So getting on and doing it ourselves, which is again what Jerry's doing within Sterling and the creator site, building a created network. And actually, it's hard graft, but getting on and doing that as individuals, I think, is important. I think, I mentioned it during the end of my talk, it's like, how do you spread that information to more people when you arrive at that learning? So, and we need to find a better way of doing that. I don't know what the better way of doing that is, but maybe, get more people out. Yes, get more people out into those environments, but that's cost. There's cost associated with that. But when we come back, how do we spread that knowledge out? Need to think more about that. I don't have a full answer, but I think culture, behaviours and culture are the key to this. It's not all about funding. It's not all about space, or space does help the home bit. It's something I'm taking away from today. Home is really important. But it's the behaviours that we have as individuals, I think, is important. So, I don't know. Any other?
I say this as somebody who worked in a university for 10 years. Universities are really difficult to collaborate with.
Yeah.
They're really big organizations. It's difficult to find the right people who are working in the right area. Even within, and it's personal experience, but my son was looking to connect with somebody. He's studying genetics at a university in Scotland, was looking for a work experience, contacted different schools. The school setup's so different across all the universities that if you're looking for a researcher in one area, it's not easy to find. And actually, what you need is to find the right person in the university who will then do all the connecting. So I think for industry who wants to partner and collaborate and develop things with universities, it's really, really hard. And I know, that's your role now, and it's a difficult one. But when it works, then I think it can be really powerful. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is to keep the universities and the entrepreneurial ecosystem connected. And hopefully the founders, it's that commercialization pieces, it's innovation and commercialization is what you need to run a business. So sometimes the researchers don't do the commercialization piece as well. And how do you support that? And that partnership with industry is so important.
I spoke to an EIR in one of the English universities last year. And one of the things he said was the biggest thing he learned was at the very beginning, ask the researcher or whoever what they want to get from it, because he says so many of them didn't want to leave academia. That was where their passion was. And he said that if you get that straight at the start, it saves a whole lot of hassle down the road, because there's no point in trying to force them in a direction they don't want to go, because it just won't work.
So does that then put a responsibility on the universities to say, well, you know what, there could be a really big piece of impact from the work that you're doing, recognise you don't want to take it forward commercially, but actually as an organisation, we can really benefit and the world can benefit from taking forward your research. I don't know if that happens or not.
One of the things which kind of struck me with this Estonian example. So the question is really how the ecosystem is dependent on the infrastructure. And then it's also kind of questions also about, okay, if the government isn't stepping in to do this infrastructure, then who steps into that place?
I think the role of government is an interesting one, because I think Ian also was talked quite a bit about the role of government.
Estonia did, in a way, unexpectedly win the lottery in that they bypassed a lot of the fixed line internet world and went straight to mobile. And that actually gave them a big advantage in the early days of technical stuff. And they built a lot of government infrastructure around that, as well as starting to build companies around that stuff. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like some of the early stuff from Skype spun out from Estonia, then back into Sweden and back. So there was kind of really interesting stuff happened as a result of like the history that led them to that point, which is interesting. And I think there's going to be a really interesting lottery moment that happens right now in Europe in particular. And you're talking about how that affects the Northeast and Aberdeen. Is like Germany's about to spend about 150 billion euros in defense over the next 5 years, prompted by the current, state of things happening in the US. And what that generally means is they're going to invest heavily into cyber, robotics, automation, which means that they're going to be attracting a lot of the world's and particularly Europe's best talent to work on this stuff. And so I do think that people haven't really worked out like this is going to happen yet, and we have a bit of a talent problem. I think about this in an Irish context where people move freely between countries, and actually it's going to be pretty interesting for people to move there. And Germany as a country are positioning this much like Israel did in the sort of 20 years ago, that to helping them to create the next startup nation. Because if anyone's ever set up a company in Germany, it's a real pain in the ass to do. And because they don't have a very sort of streamlined way of doing this, so they're trying to use this to their advantage and become their lottery ticket from stuff. And I think this could be a problem for highly skilled talent elsewhere in the European Union in particular. So, like, how do you take advantage of that in somewhere like the Northeast? I don't know. I don't know it well enough to know. But like, there's going to be more investments in that type of things, and you can build capabilities around it. So I'm not sure that directly answers the question, but it's just some interesting thoughts I've been having around this stuff recently.
There's a couple of things there. The Germany situation, to found a company, you've got to print out all the documents. If you get a stat about that, basically, it's ridiculous. So, and that will hamper Germany, not make it easy. The other thing that around Estonia that struck me was apparently they got the youngest population of multimillionaires in the world. So this is back to this early generation who are still active in the workforce. So the talent thing that you're saying is some of those will be young, some of them will be older, experienced, and often you'll find that those individuals say, yeah, what's the motivation for me to take what I've made in successful business and do something more with it in terms of ploughing in? It's a very, very complex mental, emotional thing to whether or not people will give back that whole sense of I've done my bit and therefore that's okay. Whereas in Estonia, I think we see this kind of, I've still got my life to lead here. I've got a lot of give to do, if you like. So I think there's it's highly complicated. Yes, you could argue lottery, I think, is absolutely the case. I wonder what the trigger event will be in Scotland. If there is, do we need a trigger event? I think we do, but can we do it in other ways? Yes, we could probably get there. It'll take a lot longer to get there, I think.
The interesting thing for me is like I get direct comparison between like Ireland and the UK, and in particular between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland's a very small ecosystem, and I see that Joe had a couple of points to Northern Irish companies that are doing stuff there. That's great, but it's still hugely underdeveloped. It's still the worst region in the UK for angel investment, the lowest uptake of SEIS per capita, lowest uptake of venture capital, and while it's growing, it's still miles behind everywhere else. And that's interesting to me. And anything I can do to help that, I always will. Ireland is very different. Ireland has been doing incredibly well for the last decades, more than that now. fueled by, FDI investment into Ireland. Their GDP is flying, they're throwing off capital, they don't know where to invest. A lot of that comes from the top. So earlier on, spoke about how you should sort of think about how you build startup ecosystems from the bottom up. Well, Ireland's actually been fueled from the top down. And most of that comes from government decision making in the first place. That was generally because the big economic agencies in Ireland, there are two. There's one called the IDA, and there's one called Enterprise Ireland. And the IDA is focused with bringing in all of the FDI investment into Ireland. And Enterprise Ireland is a separate one, and that's charged with creating and supporting Indigenous companies in there. And for the best part of 20 years, the IDA has been winning hands down. And so, that's been just hoovering up talent. It's been paying people really well. It means that, the economy is flying, but actually the startup ecosystem is still not as developed as it should be because most of the resources going into that. The winds of change are happening right now, and people realize that FDI surplus that's been there for a while may not be the case for the next decade, particularly with the US pullback. So they're about to put in place a whole new national strategy for this that will happen over the next 10 years to start to think about seriously reinvesting in building startup companies from the ground up.
I think as people generally, if someone helps you, I think you generally feel like you want to return the favor. So I wonder, is there something there where, I think because there is such a strong ecosystem in the Northeast, I think if there's more people that feel like they're being helped, will they then be in a position to feel that they want to kind of return the favor and give back? Is there some way of building it in that way? That
we definitely see people coming through who've done our programs and have progressed their businesses, coming back and helping, and that, as we work with them, and, we're really key at Opportunity Northeast, your relationship with the founder goes all the way through the stages. So you don't do a program and then it stops and then we don't see them again. It's a long-term relationship, and those founders come back and work with the early stage businesses. I think what the interesting thing about the Northeast and the skills is, in terms of startup businesses, we have a real focus on the founder, and we believe that founders should fail fast and do it again and again and again. And I think the skilled workforce in the Northeast, we see that coming through. Lots of people coming out of the energy sector and starting up food and drink businesses, and but they've got some really good business knowledge, which helps them not maybe perhaps fail as many times. But we believe that actually we really need to focus on the founder and encourage people to understand quickly, is that going to work? If it's not, what am I going to do next? And so we don't support companies, we support founders. And I think we see really good practice. Both the universities in Aberdeen are embedding entrepreneurial education in their programs from an early stage. So, I totally agree, schools and, children should see that as normal, but building it into programs, I think, is crucial. And also we have people like Franklin, who I think is on the call, who runs the Startup Ground in Aberdeen, and he brings young people from all over into the community, and they're bringing in great speakers to have great conversations and really expanding the network of students and young people who are part of that conversation. And I think that's really important because it's founder-led and it's, and it's inclusive.
Ian?
Yeah, I think there are some cultural and systematic things that you could change, but they're kind of longer term stuff and require a lot of things. I think more practically in the shorter term, it is that, startup, right? It's the hackathons, it's the bringing people together, it's the, right now, it's never been easier to build a product from nothing, right? Using agents and AI tools, is just exposing people to that stuff and allowing them to do that stuff is it's something quite practical that you can do in the short term. So I think I'm certainly doing it more and encouraging more people to do that stuff, is just get more people involved in this and show them that how easy it is to do things. I love side projects. Side projects are great. Everyone should have at least 5. And that's what I encourage and all this stuff. But I think more events, more get-togethers, more sharing of stuff is the way to do it, practically in the short term. But I think there's a longer-term cultural problem that does go back to kind of everything from schools and beyond.
Thank you for taking the time to listen today. If you've been inspired by what you've heard, please head over to LinkedIn and search for The Connected Network. That's connected with a hyphen, and join our community of like-minded people. You can also access our resource centre and discussion threads under the Connected Group platform on the Community Lab. The Connected Network podcast has been made possible through funding and support from the Scottish Funding Council, the Challenges Group and Podplistic.